She laughed at him in a dirt field. 7 days later, she walked into his office. Presley Hartman had never touched anything cheap in her life. Not her clothes, not her car, not the air she breathed. She grew up in a penthouse on the 43rd floor of a glass tower in Atlanta, where her father's name was printed on the side of buildings and whispered in boardrooms. Gordon Hartman had built his empire from scratch: logistics, real estate, tech infrastructure, and now thousands of people worked under his name. He had more power than most men twice his age, and he had poured every ounce of that power into the world his daughter lived in. The problem was, Presley had started to believe that world was the only world that mattered. She didn't decide to become that way. It just happened. Slowly, quietly, the way rust spreads on something expensive that nobody bothers to check. By the time she was 24, she had developed one unspoken rule about people. If they couldn't afford to sit at her table, they weren't worth her time. One evening, Gordon called her into his study. "Presley," he set down his pen. "We're going to Mill Haven this weekend." She looked up from her phone. "Mill Haven, as in the town. Your cousin Beau's wedding. It's family." Her face tightened. "Dad, you know I don't do small towns. There's nothing there. No decent hotel. No signal half the time." "Presley." His voice dropped one register. That register meant the conversation was over. "Life isn't just what's inside this building. Go pack." She went. Not happily, but she went. The drive from Atlanta to Mill Haven took 4 hours. Presley sat in the back seat of the Escalade with her 2 best friends, Jade and Tori, watching the skyline disappear in the rearview mirror. Tall buildings gave way to open highway. Highway gave way to 2-lane roads lined with pine trees and red clay. Nobody talked much after the first hour. Then the car turned off the main road onto a gravel path, and the fields opened up on both sides. Presley looked out the window and saw exactly what she expected to see. Nothing impressive. Flat land. A rusted water tower in the distance. A few old trucks parked on the side of the road. And then she saw him. A guy, maybe mid-20s, working alone in a field 50 yards from the road. He was in a faded gray t-shirt, jeans dark with soil from the knees down, working a hand irrigation line across dry rows of crops. The sun was brutal. He didn't seem to notice. Presley told the driver to slow down. She watched him for a moment. He didn't look up. Jade leaned over. "Is that what they mean by farm fresh?" They laughed. Tori pressed her face to the window. "He's been out here all day probably. Doesn't he get hot?" Presley tilted her head. "Some people are just built for that life, I guess." She said it the way someone says some people just aren't meant for more. Matter of fact. Final. The guy still didn't look up. That bothered her more than she expected. She was used to being noticed. "Drive," she said. Mill Haven on a wedding weekend was the loudest quiet place Presley had ever been. String lights everywhere. Folding chairs on the lawn. A bluegrass band warming up behind the barn. People she'd never met hugging her like they'd known her for years. By evening, the yard was packed. Presley had changed into a white sundress, the kind that cost more than most people's rent, and she stood near the edge of the gathering with Jade and Tori, holding a drink she didn't really want, scanning the crowd. That's when she saw him again. Same guy from the field. But now he was cleaned up. A plain white button-down, dark jeans, no watch, no jewelry. He stood near the fence with a cup of lemonade, talking to an older man, relaxed in a way that made him look like he owned the air around him. Presley leaned toward Jade. "That's him. The field guy." Jade raised an eyebrow. "He cleans up. Let's go say hi." Presley's smile had a particular shape when she was about to do something she'd enjoy too much. They walked over. Presley stopped a few feet away and looked him up and down with the kind of look that was meant to land. "Hey, didn't I see you out in the field earlier? You came straight from work." The guy turned. His eyes were calm. Not nervous. Not amused. Just calm. "Could have showered first," she continued. "I mean, it's a wedding." Jade and Tori giggled behind her. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then he turned back to the older man and continued his conversation like she hadn't spoken. Not with rudeness. Not with anger. like she simply wasn't a threat worth addressing. Presley blinked. She opened her mouth, closed it. She'd been ignored before. Never like that. Okay then, she said, turning away. Weird people everywhere. But his silence followed her for the rest of the night. His name was Nolan Cruz. Presley didn't know that yet. What she didn't know, what nobody at that party told her, was that Nolan Cruz had built his first company at 19 out of a 2-bedroom apartment in Raleigh. By 22, he had investors in 3 states. By 25, his infrastructure firm had contracts with some of the largest development companies in the Southeast. He had offices in Charlotte, Nashville, and Dallas. He employed over 400 people. He still came back to Millhaven every summer. Still worked the land his grandfather left him. Still wore plain clothes because he'd never understood the point of wearing your net worth on your back. The field wasn't who he was stuck being. It was who he chose to be. Presley drove back to Atlanta the next morning laughing about the whole thing. Small-town energy, she told Jade in the car. Those people live in a completely different world. She didn't know it yet, but her world and his were about to collide. 3 days later, Gordon Hartman called Presley into his office. There's a partnership meeting Thursday, he said. Big one. If this goes through, it doubles our infrastructure capacity in the Southeast. Presley straightened. Okay. And I want you to represent the company. You've been asking for more responsibility. He folded his hands. Here it is. She felt the weight of it land in her chest like something she'd been waiting for. I'll be ready. Make me proud, he said. And then, don't embarrass me. Thursday morning. The meeting was at a building downtown that Presley had driven past 100 times but never entered. 20 stories. Full glass exterior. The lobby had the kind of silence that money buys. She arrived early. Stood outside on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting her jacket, going over her notes in her head. That's when she saw him, standing near the entrance, arms crossed, looking at his phone. Plain dark jacket. No tie. No driver waiting for him. Him. The field guy. Presley almost laughed. She walked toward him with her head tilted. Wait. Seriously? She stopped in front of him. You again. What are you doing here? He looked up from his phone. Same calm eyes. Did you move to Atlanta? She continued. Looking for work? Because I have to tell you, this firm you're standing outside of, it's a little out of your lane. A security guard near the door shifted his weight. Looked at the floor. Nolan said nothing. He just watched her speak. Maybe try the South Entrance, she said, smiling. They're always hiring for maintenance. He put his phone in his pocket, walked past her, pulled open the front door, went inside. She stood there for half a second, then followed. The conference room was on the 14th floor. Presley arrived 2 minutes before the meeting started and took her seat at the long table. 12 people, maybe 15. Suits, folders, water glasses. The kind of room where every silence costs someone money. She was running over her talking points when the door opened. The room changed. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody gasped. But every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The kind of stop that happens when someone with real authority walks into a space. Nolan Cruz walked in wearing the same dark jacket from outside. 2 people in matching company lanyards trailed him. He moved to the head of the table like the chair had always belonged to him. Because it had. He sat down, opened a folder, looked up at the room. His eyes landed on Presley. She felt the floor shift under her. Let's get started, he said. His voice was even, professional, completely unbothered by the fact that she was sitting 6 feet away. She couldn't breathe right. The man she'd mocked outside a field in Millhaven. The man she'd told to try the maintenance entrance 40 minutes ago. He was running this meeting. His firm, his building. She sat completely still while he spoke about market projections, partnership terms, and regional development timelines. Every sentence was sharp. Every number was exact. The room listened to him the way rooms listen to people who've earned it. Presley heard none of it. All she could hear was her own voice. They're always hiring for maintenance. When the meeting ended, she didn't move immediately. People filtered out. Hands were shaken. Someone laughed at something near the window. She stood, walked toward the door, stopped, turned around and walked toward his assistant instead. "Excuse me. I need 5 minutes with Mr. Cruz." The assistant checked a tablet. "He's booked the rest of the afternoon. I can schedule something for—" "Please," Presley said. The word came out quieter than she meant it to. The assistant looked at her for a moment, typed something, looked back. He said 2 minutes. Now. His office was on the top floor. She walked in. He was standing at the window with his back to her, looking out at the city. He didn't turn around right away. When he did, his face was neutral. No anger, no satisfaction, just that same impossible calm. "You wanted to say something," he said. She had rehearsed something in the elevator. She'd forgotten all of it. "I was wrong," she said. "About you. Both times." He waited. "In Millhaven. And outside. This morning." She held his gaze even though every instinct told her to look away. "I said things that were cruel. And I said them because I assumed I knew exactly who you were just by looking at you. And I was completely wrong." The room was very quiet. "Why does it matter now?" he asked. It was the right question. The one she hadn't asked herself until he said it. "Because I've never had to apologize for something I actually meant," she said. "Usually when I'm wrong, nobody tells me. Nobody pushes back." She paused. "You didn't even flinch. Either time. And that, I don't know. That's when I knew I was the one with the problem." Nolan looked at her for a long moment. "I grew up being told that the way you look tells people everything about you," he said. "I decided a long time ago I wasn't going to perform wealth to make strangers comfortable." He pulled out his chair and sat down. "People like you used to bother me. You don't anymore." She felt that land. "Used to," she said. "Used to." She nodded. "Then I'm asking you, what would it take for you to see me differently? Not for business. Not for my father. For me." He studied her. Not the way people usually studied Presley, like she was something decorative, but like he was reading her, looking for something real underneath. "You'd have to actually be different," he said. "Not say it. Be it." She left without another word. She drove home in silence. No music. No calls. No texts back. She sat in her car in the parking garage of her building for 22 minutes before she went upstairs. She thought about the field. She thought about the wedding. She thought about the way he had looked straight through every version of her she'd ever put on for other people, and hadn't been impressed by any of them. She thought about the kids she'd grown up with who never had what she had. She thought about what it would feel like to build something that mattered. By the time she went to bed, she had already made a decision. Not a safe one. Not a reversible one. The kind she couldn't walk back from. She went to her father the next morning. "Dad, I want to start a foundation. Something real." She sat across from him. "There are kids in towns like Millhaven who don't have access to good tutoring, test prep, college counseling, any of it. I want to build a program. Fully funded. Free." Gordon Hartman looked at his daughter the way parents look at their children when something unexpected moves through them. "Where's this coming from?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter?" He thought about that. "No," he said. "No, I suppose it doesn't." He leaned back. "If you're serious, I'm with you." "I'm serious," she said. 6 months later, the Hartman Access Initiative had launched in 4 counties across rural Georgia. Presley ran it herself. Not from a desk in Atlanta, from the road. She drove to Millhaven on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She sat with kids in a converted community center that she and 3 other people had spent 2 weekends painting. She worked with counselors, brought in tutors, called in every favor she had to pull together laptops, curriculum materials, and college application workshops. She stopped wearing the kind of clothes that made kids feel small around her. She stopped correcting people's grammar in her head. She stopped keeping score. The people in Millhaven who had watched her arrive that first summer, polished and perfect and quietly contemptuous, watched this different version show up every week and couldn't quite reconcile the two. But they let her in. Slowly. The way trust actually works. On a Wednesday in late October, A black SUV pulled up outside the community center. Nolan Cruz stepped out. He hadn't called, hadn't scheduled anything. He stood at the entrance for a moment, reading the small hand-lettered sign on the door, Hartman Access. Everyone gets a shot. He walked in. The main room was loud. 8 or 9 kids spread across folding tables, papers everywhere, a whiteboard covered in SAT vocabulary words. Presley was crouched next to a 15-year-old girl named Deja, both of them hunched over a practice essay, Presley pointing at something on the page and saying something that made Deja laugh. Presley looked up. She saw him standing in the doorway. She didn't smile right away. She just looked at him the way you look at something you weren't sure was ever going to happen. She said something quiet to Deja, stood up, and walked over. "Hey," she said. "Hey." He glanced around the room, took it in slowly. The kids, the noise, the realness of it. "This yours. Ours," she said. "The community's. I just show up." He was quiet for a moment. "I heard about it from someone in the county office," he said. "Thought I'd come see it myself." She nodded, didn't push, didn't ask him to say more than he meant. He turned back toward the room. Watched Deja pick up her pencil and keep writing. "You know," he said, "when I saw you in that field in Millhaven, looking at me like I was something you'd stepped over, I wrote you off completely." "That's fair," she said. "But then you walked into my office and said something nobody in your position ever says. That I was wrong? That you were wrong and you knew why." He looked at her. "Most people in your world don't do that. They just rotate to a new version of the same story." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. "What you built here," he said, "is real. I've seen a lot of things that looked like this and weren't. This is." She felt something settle in her chest that had been restless for a long time. A few weeks later, he called her. Not about business. He asked if she wanted to meet for coffee. Talk. No agenda. She said yes. They met on a Saturday morning at a diner halfway between Atlanta and Millhaven. The kind of place with linoleum floors and coffee that comes in a pot that never gets cold. They talked for 3 hours. About their fathers. About what it felt like to be handed everything and still feel like something was missing. About what it cost to build something from nothing. About what it cost to give something up. He told her about the first time he came back to the farm after his company went profitable. How he worked the field for a full day before he told anyone. How it felt necessary. Like he needed to remember what hard felt like so he wouldn't confuse success with security. She told him about the night after the meeting. Sitting in the parking garage. The 22 minutes. He listened. Really listened. When they finally stood up to leave, he said, "I'd like to do this again." She said, "Yeah, me too." It didn't happen fast. Nothing real does. But it happened. By the following spring, Nolan's company had become a formal infrastructure partner for the Hartman Initiative. 3 more counties added. A scholarship program piloted. A second community center under renovation. And somewhere between the spreadsheets and the Saturday mornings, between Millhaven and Atlanta and the flat stretch of highway in between, Presley Hartman stopped being the girl from the 43rd floor. She wasn't sure exactly when it happened. Only that one morning she woke up and the person she saw in the mirror was someone she actually recognized. Someone who could apologize. Someone who could show up. Someone who had learned, the hard way, the right way, that the most powerful thing in a room isn't the person who makes everyone feel small. It's the person who doesn't need to. And Nolan Cruz? He never told anyone what she'd said to him outside the building that morning. Not because it didn't matter. Because he understood, better than most, that people are often their worst selves before they become their truest ones. He had been willing to wait and see. She had been worth waiting for. The field hadn't changed. She had. And that made all the difference.